And finally, my grandson Kyle announced, his voice booming through the microphone at the Founders' Day picnic. I'm proud to announce the sale of my grandfather's 10-acre property to Azure Lake Estates for $1.2 million. A smattering of polite applause rippled through the crowd. He put a hand on my shoulder. A gesture meant to look like affection, but felt like a nail being driven into a coffin. We're so happy to finally get him the professional care he deserves. The real estate agent beside him, a man with teeth as white and predatory as a shark's, chuckled into the mic. Kyle's being modest. Walter here is set for life. The best luxury suite at Golden Meadows is already paid for. Laughter, sharper this time, followed. They were laughing at me. The whole town, eating their potato salad and coleslaw, was watching me being sold off along with my land. It was done. It was final. The agent held up a glossy portfolio, flipping to a picture of a sterile, beige room. His new home, he declared. A few people clapped louder, maybe out of pity, maybe out of relief that the town's old recluse was finally being dealt with. Mayor Thompson gave a weak, non-committal smile. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, pinning me to my folding chair. I was a relic, an obstacle, and I had been officially cleared away. But I didn't flinch. I didn't look down or wipe away a tear. I simply kept my gnarled hands folded over the head of my hickory cane. I looked at Kyle, and his triumphant, greedy smile, and I allowed myself a small, quiet smile of my own. He mistook it for senile acceptance. He didn't see the cold, hard clarity in my eyes. He had forgotten what I do for a living. I am a carpenter. I know how to build things, including a trap. The agent leaned toward me, his breath smelling of mint and corruption. Just a few final papers to sign at the bank tomorrow, Walter, and the money is wired. He winked. A formality. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. Everyone watching saw an old man surrendering to the inevitable. They were all about to learn a lesson in what the word inevitable truly meant. But months earlier, it all began on a quiet Tuesday morning. The sun had just started burning the mist off the lake. I sat on the porch of the log cabin I built with my own 2 hands, a mug of black coffee warming my palms. The air smelled of damp earth, pine needles, and 60 years of memories. Every creak of the floorboards was a conversation with my wife, Clara. This place wasn't just wood and stone. It was the story of our lives. A quiet, sturdy life. The kind that doesn't make a sound until it's broken. That I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive. A low-slung metallic blue car that looked like an angry insect pulled up, and my grandson Kyle got out. He wore a suit that was too tight in the shoulders, and shoes that cost more than my monthly expenses. He hadn't visited in over a year, not since he'd tried to get me to invest in some cryptocurrency nonsense. His smile was wide, but it never reached his eyes. "Grandpa," he said, his voice too loud for the morning quiet. "Looking good. How are you holding up out here all alone?" He surveyed the cabin, his gaze lingering not on the hand-hewn beams or the fieldstone fireplace, but on the view of the lake. He wasn't seeing a home. He was seeing waterfront. He was seeing dollar signs. The question wasn't concern. It was an appraisal. I looked past him, to the flat, smooth stones lining the shore. I remembered a summer afternoon, the sun hot on our necks, teaching a 7-year-old Kyle how to skip them. His small hand in mine, the sheer joy on his face when he finally got one to bounce 4 times. "Best day ever, Grandpa," he'd yelled. Now, that boy was gone, replaced by this stranger who valued land more than love. After 5 minutes of strained small talk, he got to the point. "Listen, Grandpa, I've talking to some people. Very successful people. They say this land is a gold mine." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We could set you up somewhere comfortable, safe. We're cashing out a dead asset to give you a comfortable life. You won't have to lift a finger again." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It had gone cold. "This is my home, Kyle. Your grandmother and I built it. Every log, every nail. I'm not leaving." I said it plainly, without anger, a simple statement of fact, like saying the sky is blue or the water is deep. But to him, It was just a negotiation tactic, a stubborn old man's final, foolish stand against progress. His eyes scanned the porch and settled on the doorstop. A hand-carved wooden duck, its paint faded from decades of sun. Clara had loved it. Kyle nudged it with his shiny shoe. "What's this old thing?" He picked it up, weighing it in his hand. "You carved this? It's quaint." He set it back down with a dismissive thud. "Probably not worth a dime, but I guess it holds the door open." I didn't answer. I just looked at the duck. I remembered the scent of cedar shavings as Clara sanded it smooth on this very porch, her brow furrowed in concentration. She wasn't a great carver, but she was patient. The duck was lopsided and a little clumsy, but it was hers. It was the last thing she made with her hands. To Kyle, it was junk. To me, it was a foundation. "It doesn't matter what you want, Grandpa," Kyle said, his voice hardening. "A developer, Azure-like Properties, is ready to make a serious offer, and I have power of attorney." He said it so casually. "You signed the papers after your fall, 3 years ago, remember? The doctor said you shouldn't be handling your own affairs." My memory of that time was a blur of pain and medication. A betrayal so deep, I hadn't even known it happened. A chill that had nothing to do with the morning air crept over me. Power of attorney. 2 words that had just stolen my life from me. I felt the sturdy porch beneath my feet suddenly feel like loose sand. I tried to argue, to recall the details of that time, but my thoughts were a tangled mess. Kyle's confidence was a battering ram, and my defenses were made of aging paper. A week later, they came back. Kyle didn't come alone this time. He brought the shark-toothed real estate agent, Marcus. They didn't bother knocking. The screen door slammed behind them as they walked into my living room, bringing the outside world's noise and greed with them. Kyle avoided my eyes. He was the Judas, and this was his roaming guard. Marcus moved through my home like an invading general, pointing and talking. "The foundation is solid, but we'll have to tear it all down, of course. Full demolition. The value is in the frontage." He spoke about me in the third person, as if I were a ghost already haunting the property. "We'll get him packed up and moved out in a week. The developers want to break ground before the first frost." The agent's cologne was a sharp, chemical stink that clung to the air, a foul invasion of the familiar scent of cedar, wood smoke, and old books. The smell of my life was being erased, replaced by the odor of money. It was a sensory violation, a declaration that nothing I held sacred was safe from their ambition. I felt an urge to open a window, to let the clean lake air chase out the stench of their presence. Before leaving, Marcus slacked a glossy brochure onto the simple pine table Clara and I had eaten at for 50 years. On the cover, a computer-generated image showed a massive, sterile building of glass and steel where my cabin now stood. The headline was a slap in the face: Azure Lake Estates, the future of lakeside living. My past, my present, was being casually bulldozed for their future. "The initial offer is $1.2 million, Grandpa," Kyle said, naming the number as if it were a magical incantation that could solve everything. "You'll be set for life. The best suite at Golden Meadows. They have a pool." He smiled, expecting gratitude. The sum was obscene. An insult dressed up as a fortune. He was buying my soul and calling it a retirement plan. That night, unable to sleep, I opened an old photo album. I stopped at a picture of a 10-year-old Kyle, holding up a trout he'd just caught off my dock. He was missing a front tooth, and his grin was pure, unadulterated pride. My arm was around his shoulder. We were a team. I stared at the photo for an hour, trying to find a trace of that boy in the man who was now selling his memories. Defeated, I walked to Clara's old roll-top desk. Dust motes danced in the moonlight slanting through the window. I ran my hand over the wood, feeling helpless. Maybe Kyle was right. Maybe I was just a stubborn old fool, clinging to a past that was already gone. The weight of my 85 years felt heavier than ever. Perhaps it was time to let go. The thought felt like swallowing ash. My fingers brushed against a thick manila envelope tucked away in a back pigeonhole. It was labeled Household Final in Clara's elegant script. Inside, Among old insurance policies and appliance warranties was a copy of her last will and testament, bound with a brass fastener. I leafed through the dense legal text, my old eyes struggling. Then I saw it, a single paragraph, highlighted in faded yellow, containing the words usufructuary rights. The next morning, I called Kyle. My hand trembled slightly. Kyle, I found your grandmother's will. It says something in here, a word, usufruct. He cut me off with an impatient sigh. Grandpa, seriously? The lawyers went over everything when she passed. It's irrelevant. Everything went to you, which means it's yours to sell. Stop looking for loopholes. It's a done deal. He sounded so certain, so dismissive. He hung up before I could ask another question. 2 days later, the mailboat delivered a certified letter. My heart hammered against my ribs as I signed for it. It was a formal notice of sale from a law firm I'd never heard of. It listed the property, the buyer, the price, and the closing date. The final signing was scheduled for the day after the Founders' Day picnic. The clock wasn't just ticking, it was screaming. I had less than 2 weeks to understand what Clara had done. I drove my old pickup truck to the county seat and found the office of a man named Arthur Abernathy, a lawyer whose faded sign promised wills and estates. He was my age, with kind eyes and a weary slump to his shoulders. I laid the power of attorney and Clara's will on his cluttered desk. He read the POA first, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. He let out a low whistle. "I'm sorry, Walter," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. This was ironclad. It grants him comprehensive authority over all financial and property matters. It's exactly the kind of document a predatory firm would draft to gain total control. Challenging it would be difficult and expensive. He looked at me with genuine pity. It felt worse than Kyle's greed. "But what about this?" I asked, my finger trembling as I pointed to the yellowed highlight in the will. "Usufructuary rights." Abernathy leaned in, squinting. "That's an old one. Comes from Roman law. It grants someone the right to use and benefit from a property they don't own. A life estate, essentially." A tiny flicker of hope ignited in my chest. He saw it and held up a hand. "Don't get ahead of yourself," he warned. "In this case, since you inherited the property outright, the law would say the lesser right, the usufruct, was merged into the greater ownership. It's legally redundant. A ghost clause." He agreed to check the case law, but his tone told me it was a fool's errand. The flicker of hope died, leaving a cold, dark void. 2 days later, the real estate agent Marcus hammered a large sold sign into my front lawn. The red of the sign was a violent slash against the green of the grass Clara had so carefully tended. Neighbors drove by slowly, their faces a mixture of curiosity and pity. I was no longer Walter, the man who built his own house. I was the subject of town gossip, the old man who lost everything. I had to get out. I drove into town for groceries I didn't need, just to escape the sight of that sign. I ended up at the local tavern, hoping for a quiet corner. But as I walked in, I heard a familiar, booming voice. Kyle. He was at the bar with Marcus, buying around for a few locals. They were celebrating their victory, my defeat. "He's so far gone, he's quoting Latin at me." Kyle laughed, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. "He found some word in Grandma's will, usufruct, and thought it was a magic spell to stop the sale." Marcus snorted. "What's that? A type of New Age yogurt?" Their laughter was a physical blow. The public humiliation felt complete. "The old man can quote whatever he wants," Marcus said, clapping Kyle on the back. "His signature is on that POA. Our title search came back squeaky clean. The deal closes Monday at 10 a.m. sharp. By then, he'll be settled into his new room watching daytime television. It's a done deal, my friend, a very profitable one." I left without buying anything. The memory of teaching that boy to skip stones turning to poison in my mind. The betrayal was no longer a distant legal concept. It was raw and public. He hadn't just taken my home. He had taken my dignity. Piece by piece, and sold that too. I drove home in a daze, the world outside my windshield blurry and indistinct. A phone was ringing when I got back. It was Abernathy. "Walter, I've spent 2 days on this. I'm sorry. The merger doctrine is clear. The usufruct clause was extinguished the moment you inherited the house and has no legal standing. There's nothing I can do. The finality in his voice was absolute. My last hope was gone. The crushing defeat was total. A developer's lawyers would bury us in motions before we ever saw a judge, he continued, his voice heavy with resignation. They'd paint you as incompetent, leaning on an archaic clause to block a legitimate sale. It's a fight you can't win, Walter. I thanked him for his time and hung up. The silence that followed was the sound of the end. The next morning, a delivery truck rumbled down my driveway. Two men unloaded a stack of flat-packed cardboard boxes. On the side of each, printed in cheerful blue letters, were the words, "Welcome to Golden Meadows Senior Living." Kyle had sent them. It was a message, a final, cruel twist of the knife. I was no longer a person. I was just cargo to be packed and shipped. I spent the day in a fog, taping boxes together. Each item I touched screamed with memory. The faded armchair where Clara read to me. The chipped coffee mug I'd used every morning for 30 years. The feel of the worn floorboards under my feet. I was packing up a life, not just a house. It felt like a desecration, a violation of something sacred. My foot nudged the wooden duck by the door. I bent down, my old joints protesting, and picked it up. Its weight felt strange in my hand, both insignificant and impossibly heavy. It was all I had left of her that they hadn't put a price on. I held it, this clumsy, lopsided bird, and for the first time, I felt the full crushing weight of my loss. I was utterly, completely alone. I ran my thumb over the worn paint on its head, feeling the faint grooves of Clara's carving knife. The smooth, cool wood was a stark contrast to the hot tears that were now silently streaming down my face. The scent of old cedar, faint but distinct, rose from the wood. It was the smell of a happier time, a time of love and safety that now felt like a distant dream. It was a sudden, inexplicable anger. I refused to put it in a box. It was not going to Golden Meadows. I walked over to the cold, stone fireplace and set the duck on the mantel. Placing it right in the center, it looked small and defiant against the vast stone. A silent witness. It was the only thing in the house that wasn't surrendered. That night, I sat in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of my life, packed in cardboard coffins. This was my lowest point. The legal fight was over. The emotional fight was lost. Kyle had won. The picnic was tomorrow, where my humiliation would be made a public spectacle. Then the signing on Monday. It was over. All of it. My eyes fell on Clara's will, still sitting on the table. A useless relic. I picked it up, intending to throw it on the fire, but my gaze caught on the signature page. 2 witnesses. The first was our old neighbor, long since passed. The second was Sarah Jenkins. I remembered her. A bright young girl who worked in her father's notary office after school. An idea, thin and fragile as a spider's thread, began to form in my mind. Not a plan, just a question. Sarah had taken over her father's business after he retired. She was still in town. I found a number for Jenkins Notary Services. My hands shook as I picked up the phone, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What did I have to lose? Jenkins Notary? A warm professional voice answered. It was Sarah. I explained who I was, my voice raspy. I asked that she remembered notarizing my wife's will, all those years ago. Mr. Cooper? Of course, I remember, she said kindly. I remember your wife, Clara. She was very insistent about one thing. She made me read a section out loud to make sure I understood it. Something about a duck? The word hit me like a physical shock. A duck. My eyes shot to the mantelpiece. What about a duck, Sarah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It wasn't in the will itself, she recalled. It was on a separate document, a codicil. She had it notarized and instructed my father to file it as an attachment directly with the property deed at the State Land Registry Office. She said it was her fail-safe. The revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning. A separate document, filed with the deed, not the will. Kyle's lawyers, focused on the will in the POA, would have done a standard title search. They wouldn't have pulled the original deed filing from 30 years ago and examined its physical attachments. They were looking for liens, not failsafes. They had missed the foundation. My mind reeled. I thanked Sarah, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name, and hung up. I walked to the fireplace and tipped the duck from the mantel. It felt different now, heavier. I turned it over in my hands, my fingers searching the felted base. There, pressed deep into the wood and covered by the felt, was a small hollowed-out compartment. My fingers, clumsy with age and adrenaline, pried open the small wooden plug. Inside was a tiny, tightly rolled piece of paper, yellowed with age. I carefully unrolled it. It was a notarized copy of the codicil Sarah had mentioned. It stated in Clara's clear hand that the usufruct clause was ironclad and could not be extinguished by merger, transfer, or sale, and was attached to the deed in perpetuity. Clara hadn't left me a clause, she'd left me a bomb. Beneath her signature was a filing reference, Deed 44C81, Attachment B, State Land Registry. This was it, the key, the instrument. The picnic was tomorrow. The final signing at the bank was Monday. I now had a new schedule. First, the picnic, where I would let them have their public triumph. Then, first thing Monday morning, I would be filing a title dispute with the State Land Registry Office. The Founders' Day picnic unfolded exactly as I knew it would. A perfect, sunny, late summer day for a public execution. I sat through Kyle's speech, the applause, and the pitying glances. I let Marcus the shark display the picture of my future beige cage. I absorbed their triumph, their certainty, their utter lack of doubt. I played my part as the defeated old man to perfection, my quiet smile my only shield. When Kyle walked me back to my truck, he had the gall to sound magnanimous. It's for the best, Grandpa. You'll be comfortable. No more worrying about leaky roofs or chopping wood. He patted my arm. The final signing is at the bank, Monday at 10 a.m. Just a formality to get you your funds. I'll pick you up at 9. His condescension was a thick, suffocating blanket. I just nodded. All right, Kyle, I'll be ready. As I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror, already on his phone, probably telling Marcus how easy it was. He was so busy celebrating the demolition of my house that he never once thought to check the foundation. But I had spent my life building things to last. And so had Clara. Monday morning, I was up before the sun. I didn't wait for Kyle. I drove my old truck into the state capitol, the notarized deed from the ducked belly resting on the passenger seat. At precisely 0 a.m., when the doors of the State Land Registry office opened, I was the first person in line. A young clerk with tired eyes asked how she could help me. On filing a title dispute and a notice of list pendens on property parcel 734B, I said, my voice steady and clear. I handed her the papers Abernathy had helped me prepare over the weekend, now armed with Clara's codicil. Her eyes widened as she read the attached document and cross-referenced the deed number in her system. She found the original filing. She found attachment B. Well, she whispered, looking from the screen to me. I've never seen one of these stand alone. A non-extinguishing usufruct. It's bulletproof. She stamped the documents with a satisfying thud. The title is now officially clouded. No sale can proceed until this is resolved by a court. The notice will be electronically served to all interested parties within the hour. She handed me my receipt. It was 8:45 a.m. I drove not to the bank, but to a small diner across the street. I ordered coffee and a slice of apple pie and took a seat by the window with a perfect view of the bank's entrance. At 9:50 a.m., Kyle's angry blue car screeched into the parking lot, followed by Marcus in his gleaming silver Mercedes. The developers, 2 men in identical gray suits, arrived moments later. They stood outside the bank doors, a portrait of impotent rage. Kyle was frantically checking his phone, his face turning a blotchy red. Marcus was pacing, yelling into his own phone, his shark smile gone, replaced by a snarl. They were supposed to be inside, collecting their millions. Instead, they were locked out, stranded on the curb, by a ghost from 30 years ago. Kyle saw me. He pointed, his expression a mask of disbelief and fury. He stormed across the street, dodging traffic, and burst into the diner. He stopped at my table, his chest heaving. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "The bank just got an alert. The sale is frozen. Something about a title dispute? You can't do this." "I didn't do anything, Kyle," I said calmly, taking another bite of pie. "Clara did. 30 years ago. She knew what kind of man you'd become." I pushed the stamped copy of the land registry filing across the table. "It's called an ironclad usufruct clause. You should look it up. It means that while you may have sold the land, I have the legal right to live in and use my home until the day I die." His face went pale. The legal jargon was complex, but the implication was brutally simple. "But the new owners, they can't build, they can't do anything." He looked as though I just told him the world was flat. The foundation of his entire scheme had crumbled into dust, and he was standing in the ruins. "That's right," I said, savoring my coffee. It was hot this time. "They bought a $1.2 million piece of land with a permanent immovable tenant. Me. You didn't sell them a dead asset, Kyle. You sold them a liability. A very, very expensive one. And I imagine their lawyers will be wanting to have a word with you and Marcus about fraudulent misrepresentation." He just stared, speechless. The full weight of the catastrophe was settling on him. The lost commission, the lawsuits, the public humiliation shifting from me to him. He had been so sure of his victory, so dismissive of the past. He had dismissed the duck as junk, the will as irrelevant, and me as a relic. I laid a $10 bill on the table to cover my breakfast. "You thought you were selling my home," I said, my voice quiet but as hard as oak. "You were wrong. You were only selling the dirt underneath it." I stood up, my old bones not feeling quite so old anymore. "And now, that's your problem to solve, not mine." The final insult, the one he had prepared for me, was delivered by the developer's lawyer an hour later. On speakerphone in Kyle's car, the lawyer's voice was arctic. "Mr. Thompson, your client sold us a property under false pretenses. The title is fatally flawed. We are not only withdrawing our offer, we are suing you, your agency, and your grandson for damages and fraud. Do you understand?" I wasn't there to hear it, but Abernathy, who had been copied on the legal notice, called to tell me. The trap, built by Clara and sprung by me, had worked perfectly. The public humiliation I endured at the picnic was now being repaid tenfold in the private hell of lawyers' offices and broken contracts. The town would be talking about this for years. When I got home, the sold sign was still on my lawn. I walked over, gripped the wooden post, and pulled. It resisted for a moment, its roots deep in my soil. Then, with a final, satisfying crack, it came free. I dragged it to my workshop, sawed it into 4 pieces, and tossed it onto my firewood pile. I walked back to the cabin. The afternoon sun glinted off the lake, the same way it had for 60 years. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I had fought for this quiet, this peace. I had fought for my life, my home, my memories, and I had won. I went inside and picked up the wooden duck from the mantel. It felt light in my hands now, its duty done. I placed it back where it belonged, as the doorstop. A humble, lopsided, priceless guardian. A silent testament to a woman who had seen the future and built a fortress around the man she loved. I walked onto the porch, sat in my rocking chair, and looked out over the water. The gentle lapping of the waves against the shore was the only sound. My home was safe. My dignity was restored. I picked up a smooth, flat stone from the railing, stood up, and with a practiced flick of my wrist, sent it skipping across the calm, clear surface of the lake. It bounced 7 times before it disappeared.